Yeah, I love having my heart broken, and yeah, I would never seek it, and I would never wish it on anyone.
Ha!
But
Just repeat that. I love it, but I would never seek it.
yeah,
Okay, that is that is a key. And that's a key, in my opinion.
yeah, yeah. No, it is, because biologically, as evolved primates and, animals, as you said, we're programmed and wired to seek pleasure, avoid pain. That's what all of this mind stuff and language is about. It's all pointing to potential.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now you're on it. And so I don't know what's good for me. I do not know what's good for me. Life knows better than I know what is good for me. That is,
Yeah.
See, that's very beautiful. That's really beautiful to understand that, because when you do, you can stop trying to always make yourself happy and you just live. You can stop chasing this dream of when I attain, and you can just be and let the living of it be the teacher. You can just live. That's what some people call having faith. I don't like that word because it has a lot of other connotations, but in a way it fits in this particular usage. You just say humans have lived and matured for countless thousands of years. There's something built into the system here that works. Maybe I should get with that instead of trying to be spiritual. Maybe life is better than spirituality, a lot better. Maybe love and friendship are a lot better than making myself cold and unfeeling. Maybe. See, I can't teach this, but in my own process, I found myself awake. I just did. And when see, it's audacious to say that because people have these images of these, what you call the giants. They were the awakened ones. How come little Bobby can be awakened? How did that happen? I don't know. And it took me a few years to admit it to myself because I kept doubting. Oh, no, you're just on an ego trip, man. You read about all this stuff and now you think you've got it. You're really cool. All that trying to figure it out. And then I did. I figured it out, or it figured itself out. And how it figured out is this is it. Or as Ramana Maharshi said, be as you are. That's very simple. I didn't know anything. I hadn't even heard of Ramana Maharshi when this happened to me. Never heard of him. I wasn't really into much spiritual literature of the 20th century. I was back in the Middle Ages with the Zen cats. That's what I was interested in. So, and then I got into Gurdjieff, but I didn't know who Nisargadatta was either when this happened to me. Oh, I learned all that later. In fact, I've learned my spirituality things. It's all the 21st century when I read these things. And that was after people said, you don't know who this is, or you really must know who that is. So, so the point, it's not about no self. It's about being the self you really are, not trying to fix it. See what that's like for a day or two. You might like it. Don't stand outside yourself critiquing it all the time and trying to adjust it or say that's not, I want to attain, I can't just be ordinary. You know, I mustn't masturbate because an enlightened being would never do such a thing, or whatever it is. See, that's the game that people are playing on themselves. And it's just like Christianity. It's the fantasy of sin. See, we're all sinners here and we have to become enlightened. so that we don't sin anymore. It's the same thing. And all these Americanos were brought up Christians, and they had it pounded into them. And then they decided they didn't like it. And then they go over to India and find something better. And what they got out of it was the same thing. Because what you understand is what you understand. They didn't understand what Nisargadatta was talking about. He said that. They don't get it. And Ramana Maharshi, when he said, be as you are, well, it couldn't be that simple. Maybe it's okay for him because he gets to sit around in a diaper and have people waiting on him. But how can I just be who I am right now?
Yeah. So, So I want to circle back to what you said right before we hit pause, because I really did. There was a section towards the end of your book in the last 200 pages, this whole kind of, I feel like maybe, about 2/3 of the way through the book, you had a chapter on the art and the artist, an age-old kind of question. It's kind of, in my view, personal, whether you can separate the art from the artist or not. So it depends. There's a line there where I can't, and I have no interest to watch Woody Allen movies, knowing what I feel like I know about him now, even though he was one of my favorite filmmakers in high school, and maybe even for that reason. But at the same time, the flip side of that is the human side of the humanizing side of these things. Like I told a friend of mine once that, Ramana never, there's no record of him ever describing any sexual desire. And she said, oh, so he was asexual. And she doesn't know anything about non-duality. She was just like, oh, so he was, and I said, oh yeah, in modern terms, if Ramana was around, that's probably what people would call him, asexual. I mean, if those stories are true. Because of course there's a lot that hasn't been documented about Ramana, but I tend to see it because I've had a couple of friends in my life who are male and just had no sexual desire. And it's something they kind of struggled with because of society's expectations on them. And it's a rare thing, but I've known at least
a percentage of the population is rather asexual, just don't have much interest in it, if any. That's just, it's not, any psychologist will tell you that. That's just normal. Everything in the human being is on a spectrum. All of it, every tendency. There's people at one end or the other, and they really stand out. Most of us are in the middle somewhere, and that's just the way it is. For all of us, it's normal. So there's people at the asexual, and then there's other people who are completely driven and obsessed by sex, and that's what their whole life is about. They're at the other end of it. Most of us aren't in that, either one of those conditions. But being celibate is not an attainment of anything.
Right.
It's not a goal. It's not a way to transcend one's humanity or one's ego. It has nothing to do with that. Nothing.
Well, it seems at most, I guess, it would build up willpower, maybe, or something like just proving to yourself you can do something difficult, basically. I mean, like leading up to this interview, I don't know why this notion came to me, but I thought, oh, it'd be interesting to just not talk for 2 days prior to this, because I'm just stuck in bed, injured. I don't have to talk to anybody for a couple of days if I don't want to. And so I didn't. And it was really interesting what happened. It was interesting to notice the way my mind kind of went a little crazy at first, because I'm so used to talking to people, and then it kind of settled down, and now I'm enjoying talking to you. And it's also interesting. But yeah, I love what you said about the spectrum of human expression. Yeah, on one end you might have a Ramana, on the other end you might have a Genghis Khan, just, as you said, a portion of all of our DNA is Genghis.
That guy got all the Genghis Khan got all the pussy, eh?
There you go. Yeah, he was quite a he was something. Old great grandfather Genghis,
Well, flashing back to some question you asked me earlier about Wasn't I concerned about people making an object out of me? And I said, not really, because the way that I talk, 99% of the people who have that tendency to do that would be put off immediately. When I say Genghis Khan got all the pussy, that's not really kosher, not in that world. Now, there will be 1% who'll say that, oh, wow, Robert's really hip. I get that. I understand. I'm sorry about that. What I do enjoy is when somebody really gets me. And what they say is, Robert's really bright. I like the things he says, without feeling Robert can instruct me on how to live, because I can't. I have no way to tell anybody what to do next. I barely know what I have to do next. I don't know what I have to do next. I find myself doing things. I can't even direct my own, I can't even steer my own fucking ship here, much less teach someone else how to steer it. I can't. And I think I'm honest in saying that. Some people, when they hear that, find it refreshing or enlightening. Great, I agree, it is. But it's not a spiritual teaching. It's just a confession. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing here. Nobody does, in my opinion. We're all just fucking around, doing the best we can. That's what Kurt Vonnegut said. We're all just farting around. I like Kurt Vonnegut. He said we're all just farting around. And then on the Woody Allen thing, I have to comment on that too. I love Woody Allen. He was one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. And I was involved in filmmaking for a while, long, long ago. Yeah, I also have a hard time now watching his films, but not because he's a bad man, so how can I be enjoying this? My problem with it is that when I watch the films, I now see them as confessions of his own psychology, his own sex hang-ups. I knew that anyway, but now it's really clear that in a film like Manhattan, he really, in that where he has a 17-year-old girlfriend and all that, and that's what he was really doing in life. And so it's kind of hard to watch the films without always thinking about Woody. And that kind of spoils it.
Yeah.
For me. But but not because I think that we ought to cancel people who have bad personalities. I don't believe that.
Right. Well, okay. So, gosh, so much juicy material and everything you're saying. I mean, full of what you described as potential, putting your foot in your mouth, or my foot in my mouth as I start this YouTube channel. But I'm just going to be honest about my perspective. And my perspective is, I agree with everything you're saying, more or less. I choose not to use certain language like that. Well, no, I guess, what am I thinking of? Where is this taking my mind? I guess, no, I like everything you said. It's great.
Well, I'm just speaking the way I speak with my friends. See, I'm not putting on. No, I don't feel that I'm on. Even though I know that this is a video and it'll be out there and people will watch.
Yeah.
I don't feel that I'm on stage here. I'm just. If you were in the room with me now and there was no fucking video, I might be saying the same fucking thing. I'm emphasizing. I'm emphasizing the F word here. I don't really speak that way all the time, but just to give a flavor that this is not some kind of sacred conversation. It really isn't. We don't know.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the question I asked you earlier. I'd like to hear, instead of reflecting on all the things I just said, people hear it. I want this to focus on this question for at least for a moment of, is this is entertaining, and it will be taken as entertainment by a lot of people who watch it. But is it just entertainment, or is there actually something? Is there actually something? To me, that's the biggest question in all of this. Are we really entirely just farting around, like Vonnegut said? Or he wasn't actually just farting around. He wrote a lot of really interesting books and was a really good author. I wonder if just farting around is pushing it a little, and maybe there's 1% or a little bit of what we're doing that isn't just entertainment. I wonder. I don't know.
Right.
I like to think on it. I'd like to hear what you feel.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Gosh, this to me gets back to the unknowable realm of things. I don't think I know why I'm doing what I'm doing exactly. So, or what the effect is. I love the Zen story of the guy that loses the horse, and then the neighbor says, "Oh, what rotten luck," and then he says, "We'll see," and then he gets 3 horses the next day. Like the horse comes back with 3 more horses, and he's like, "Oh wow, what great luck," and he says, "We'll see," and it goes on and on from there, where it never lands. And to me, this goes back to the heartbreak, and perhaps the pushing the boundaries of what is socially acceptable for different people, because that's unique to different people. Everyone has their own. You were talking in one of your gathering lectures about people who talk about drug usage, or who try drug usage, or psychedelics, and how there's different tolerance levels of risk involved. And you had a friend who went to jail for 5 or 6 years for marijuana back in the day, and then now it's legal in like half the country or something. I don't know, but not in my state, good old Texas. but it is becoming increasingly decriminalized. And I actually got stoned off some legal. Well, they have CBD oils that get me just as stoned as marijuana if I want to. That's totally legal now. I can get legally stoned.
That's the Delta 8 cannabis.
Yeah, exactly. Delta 8 is legal, and I'm very sensitive to CBD. People say at a certain dose, CBD itself will get me stoned, but just as much as anyway. But my point being, the range of topics that are comfortable to talk about in public or in private, or even within one's own mind, because there is a thought policing in most people's minds that that I guess that's what Freud was referring to as the superego to some extent, where even by yourself, and I have all of that. I don't deny that I have. I think it's inescapable, and I also think there's an element of like you were saying in that gathering talk, where if somebody's a total wild man or whatever, just they're going to probably get in trouble, and so there's a reason to sort of self-police to some extent, even though that's a pretty crude way of putting it. But yeah, as far as whether this is entertainment or not, I mean, hell if I know. I mean, if there's something else, I feel like the moment if I were to say that there is, that's the moment I say, oh yeah, this is special. I've got something special to say. This is different than all the other stuff. When really what I like is that this is just, it isn't. What I like is that it is and it isn't. And
yeah, I like that.
Because
I really
like I mean,
I like that.
Thank you.
So on the self-policing thing,
yeah,
the way that I see that is there's no such thing as self-control. There's the illusion of self-control, but really you're just acting out what you must act out, which also takes into account fears of punishment or disgrace that are also metaphors in your brain that are triggered under certain circumstances. The next person doesn't have those same metaphors. They have a different set of assumptions, and they actually do act out and end up in jail. That's right. So actually, what we call myself, we have no control over it at all, zero control. It comes upon us like fate. Then we make up explanations. We say, oh yes, well, I really wanted to, but what kept me from doing it was thinking about years in prison. Well, yes, I get that, but the next fellow didn't have that same metaphor about years in prison. For one reason or another, let's say he's psychopathic, those brain structures, so those little tubules of consciousness, Penrose, weren't present in that person, or not present in the same profusion as they were in your mind, and so that person acted differently. I think this is a key understanding.
Yeah.
When I say I found myself awake, that's what I understood. I'm not doing this. None of it. None of it. This is all just arising. The same way that that bee is buzzing in the flower, ideas are buzzing in my mind. And I call it my mind and I call it my ideas, but it's no more mine than the buzzing. It's all the same perception. There's the perceiver of all this that we call myself, but the perceiver is not separate from the arising. It's part of it. It's all the same. See, there's the non-duality. It's all the same wave that comes up, and we ride it for all we're worth. That's all we can do, and it's difficult. It's not easy. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's great, man. If you're a musician, if a band gets into a groove, you don't even feel like you're doing anything. Your guitar is playing itself. I mean, that's a real experience that musicians have. They say, wow, suddenly my fingers are just moving. Robert's not doing anything here. Music is doing all. It's a beautiful experience. That's an experience of non-self. And that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. The thing is that I confess, I'm that way all the time. It never stops. It never has stopped for years, including real times of pain, difficulty, and everything. I just realized this is not happening to me. This is me. There's no me to whom it can happen. It's all me. It's all me. It's my perceptions. That's all I know. That's all I know.
Is there a
excuse me, just to put the cap on it. When Ramana Maharshi said, "Be as you are," that wasn't flippant. It didn't mean you could just fuck around and do fuck all and everything was groovy. That's not what he was saying. He was saying to connect to your actual being, not what society expects of you, not your hopes and dreams, not all that. The actual being here right now that you have no control over. This moment is just it. Each moment is just what it is. It can't be anything else. No one can fix it. By the time you notice it, it's gone and we're on to the next moment. There's no repair work to be done. There's no adjustments. That's what I'm saying. Now, to me, I call that awake. Other people say no, and I've had this discussion with people. They say, no, Robert, that's not what awake is. Awake is when you realize that you're connected to God, or you're connected to the one, or there's nothing but consciousness. That's awake. They will say that to me. And I just go like this, what? You didn't hear anything I said? It's amazing. Just amazing that someone can talk this way and you don't hear it. And yet you say that non-duality is your bag. Really? I just said there's no doer. That won't do it for you? Oh no, because non-duality is this other thing. It's when you realize that none of this is real and there's just consciousness is real. No, I don't say that. I have no idea what real is, and neither do you, and neither did Ramana Maharshi or Nisargadatta. No one ever knew what was real, and we have no way of knowing that. What we know is our assumptions and our impressions that were handed to us on a silver platter when we were growing up the first few years of life. All that was programming was shoveled in there into Nisargadatta as well as into Robert Saltzman. The same. And he spent the rest of his life working that out, just like I'm doing mine. That's why it's mythological in the way you were asking about before. He had his parents, he had his gods and goddesses. And then he tries to come to a solution. He works on it. He's a bright guy, and he's working on, and he does. He awakens in his way, and he talks about what that's like for him. And other people go there, and they just the way that I'm misunderstood, in the very same way. He was misunderstood, and all these misunderstanders are the Northern California spiritual teachers of the late 20th century that everybody bowed to and paid a lot of money to enlightenment. These people whose names you know that I no longer mention. It's too hard. I don't like to work that hard, but we all know who they were. They went over there and imbibed from this guy's tit, and they did not understand a word that he said. And he said they didn't understand. They came back, and now I'm a teacher. It's just ridiculous. Just ridiculous, in my view, in my opinion.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I don't know who does and doesn't get even. Yeah, well, yeah, that's a topic I don't really want to touch on too much because there's so much of I don't know involved in it. It's just my opinion feels kind of meaningless. But something you said about, yeah, there's something you wrote in your book about if you had been raised in a different way, in a different culture, you know, you might have been born into, you might have had a similar awakeness, but it would be filtered through the perhaps stained glass window of, you know, of Christianity or anything, you know, and you live in a community that's very Catholic and Christian, I believe, in Mexico.
My background is Judeo-Christian, and I had to discard all of that bullshit in order to be awake. And Nisargadatta's background was Vedantic, and he had to get rid of that bullshit, and he did. He got rid of it. He said, God, Brahma, you are not in God. God is in you. That's a direct quote from Nisargadatta. Nobody likes that one very much, though, because they don't understand what the fuck he was talking about. But that's what he was saying, that all of this is inside of me. I'm not this little offshoot of some, and that's what Ramana Maharshi was saying when he said, they say, meaning the spiritual teachers say that all we are is the arms and legs of God. And he said, and then they have this philosophy that they've developed to explain all of that. He said, I'm so glad I never got involved in any of that. And
well, I wish.
I didn't hear you, sorry.
Well, yeah, I don't have the quote available right in front of me, but so maybe we'll just have to move on. But there was a part of one of your books where you did say, you were speculating that if you had been raised in a different way, that you may have been awake, and it would have, the awake could have been filtered through an expression that would sound Christian or sound.
Yes, exactly.
Does that
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I was raised in a Judeo-Christian
but you're saying you awoke from it. You're saying you awoke from that languaging or that filter.
Yeah, exactly. What I said is God is bullshit. It's bullshit. So that's what I mean. It's just bullshit. And that's what Nisargadatta was saying. He was saying, I'm not in God. God is an idea in my mind. And that's what I'm saying. It's a bullshit idea that was put there. And it has all these connotations that were poured into you before the age of reason. And you can't separate. And let me go back to, I was talking about cognitive science before, Art. Let's stay there for a moment.
Sure.
When you hear a word, God, there are countless metaphors in your mind. They're there. They're encoded in the brain. They're actual physical structures. They're chemicals. They're connections between synapses. Those all, a lot of those were put in there when you were 1 year old, 1.5 years old, 2 years old, as you were saying before you really had the sense of myself. Certainly long before you had the sense of reasoning, could this be true? What does this mean? Long before that, all these metaphors were poured in there. God, the Father, God, the Punisher, countless. And then when you hear the word God, they're all triggered, whether you want them to be or not. All of that just goes off like a storm. You can't take all of it in, so there'll be one little part of it that becomes a thought. And you may think I should go to church more, or you may think this is hanging me up. I don't really like religion, whatever it is, that'll be the thought. But all of the storm is taking place in the brain. This is what I was saying before. Because of our human limitations, we can't take it all in at once. So we filter it down like a funnel, and we just get one little drop at the bottom at random, whatever that happens to be. But meanwhile, that's all there. And it's all triggered by every word that is spoken. That's cognition. That's how we understand language in terms of metaphor. There's millions of them in our. They're encoded in there. They're already there. That's how we can understand language. They were given to you as a child when you learned your language. You learned the language. The words had connotations. So the word God means one thing, and the word whore means something entirely different. Because when I say whore, your mind fills up with other things, judgmental ones. That's a fallen woman. That's a no good person, and all the rest of it. But when I say God, oh, well, that's this great, he's so kind to us and heals us when we're, he gives us peace. These were the impressions that were poured into our minds. So when I say God is bullshit, I'm just using 21st century language for the same thing that Nisargadatta was saying when he said, I am not in God, God is in me. It's an idea in my mind, is what he was saying.
Yeah.
It's actually not an idea, it's countless metaphorical connections. You have to understand this. Our brain it's more complicated than this galaxy that we're living in. More complicated. I've written about this. I think it's in the 10,000 Things. Pretty sure. I mean, depending on the thing. Yes, it is. So there's the brain, and it's got all these connections incalculable number of connections. Each one of those represents a metaphor. God the Punisher, God the Healer, God the Judge, the one who sends you to hell or heaven, God who sanctifies marriage, God who doesn't want you to play with your penis, all the rest of it, that's all there, all of it. When you hear the word God, there's this explosion. We can't stand it. We cannot, we evolved to ignore that explosion and just take the one drop that may be most necessary to this situation. I'll give you another example, but we'll leave God and horrors out of it. When we evolved, tigers could kill us. Now they can't. We kill them because we've got guns and everything. But back in the day, tigers were more powerful than humans. And they ruled the roost in the jungle. And you had to know all about tigers. So you would have all these metaphors in your mind about sounds in the night. What does that mean? Rustling in the brushes. Well, all of these. And when you heard like that, a storm would go off. But you couldn't start thinking about tigers 10 years ago, and maybe it's not a tiger and all the rest of it. You had to know. You had to identify immediately. You had to get that one drop from the brain that would either send you running up, climb a tree, or I can stay in bed. And this is how we evolved. We evolved to react and respond, not to know truth. So
Yeah,
that's why,
yeah,
that's why the word God is bullshit. It doesn't refer to anything. It refers to a storm in your mind.
I right. No, I hear you, Robert. I'd like to respond to some of what you said in a couple of different ways. Um, so first of all, just my own background. I wasn't raised with, I guess, a traditional idea of God per se. My mom and dad were respectively raised Catholic and raised Jewish, and but they were more, in their philosophy. My mom and dad were respectively into New Age things, and then my dad was into atheism and skepticism. So I sort of had this interesting hodgepodge that was very confusing, maybe, and maybe that's part of why I have a pretty open mind, because my parents, there might have been some flaws with, my dad in particular, that, but even, yeah, that just leads to more interesting topics of psychology, which maybe we'll get to, maybe we won't. But basically, I like Joe Rogan's podcast. He's gotten really famous from it because he's good at it, I think. And one of the things he's pointed out, the reason why he questions so much about God and society and convention, is because when he was 4 years old, I think, or around that age, he saw his dad come home and punch his mom in the face because she brought home the wrong type of milk. And he said that was such a shock to him that he never trusted what people said again, to some degree. It began this questioning, the skepticism. And in a similar sense, I saw this interview with Eckhart Tolle where he described, somebody asked him, is it possible to awaken or something without suffering? And he says he doesn't know, but he doesn't imagine so, because he said, what would be the motivation to question things if pleasure is all you know? And of course, there's the famous story of the Buddha, who saw suffering outside of his, protected little area that his parents made for him. And once he saw suffering, he must have had empathy, and it created suffering in him. If the Buddha had been a psychopath, that story would have gone very differently, maybe. And so, what am I getting at? I wanted to basically just clarify my point from earlier. You don't need to respond to it at this point, because you just gave some brilliant responses there from your own experience. So, but I listened to this one podcast a while back at the start of coronavirus. This historian, she was talking about what it was like during the Black Plague in Europe, but she said the most common question she gets asked at dinner parties is, were these people from the Renaissance time period, or were they atheists? That's a very common question she gets asked. And she said what people are really asking her is they just want the validation of, oh, well, I'm a smart atheist, so, Galileo or Machiavelli and Leonardo da Vinci, they must have been atheists, right? Because they were smart. And you may disagree with this, but she said based on her research, there's nothing to suggest that they were atheists, or that they didn't believe in God, or that they didn't believe in the Bible. But what was known about them, what is documented, is that they all had very radically unique ideas and interpretations of the Bible and God. And so this is more of where I'm coming from when I hear the word God, or even when I hear the word consciousness, or, pick your garden variety non-dual teacher, whatever they're saying. My mind goes more to the inclusiveness. And this ties into a topic I'm really interested to get your take on, which is the yin and yang perspective on all of this, where a lot of what I hear you saying, I mean, the title of your book, even, depending on no thing, and it has the wonderful acronym of don't, if you take the first letter of all the words. So I think don't, it reminds me of neti, not this, depending on no thing, not that, not that, not that. And you said you others and you yourself have described your books as having this sort of approach to showing people, like hitting it from a million different angles, 360 degrees, just taking away all the handholds, etc. until you're forced to find your own mind if you're really going on the journey that your books are presenting. But I would say from my perspective, there's an opposite perspective of yin. I would say that's the yang perspective of not this, not this, not this. And I would say the yin perspective as a metaphor would be inclusive. It would be also this, also this, also this, coming from a place of not knowing what anything really is. And it's going to be hard for me to describe it further than that. And I don't know if you have a take on this. I'll just also say that, Ramana, famously said that the path of self-inquiry, questioning, leads to the same place as the path of surrender. And he saw no difference because they both go beyond belief. That's my take on it. I'm curious your thoughts on this yin versus yang approach or anything else that I said.
Oh, well, I think that certainly is an approach. If it works for you, that's beautiful. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm expressing myself when I speak. I'm not trying to teach anybody anything. I know this is hard to understand because we've been so coached to connect awakening and teaching. The idea is these so-called awakened beings now go into the world like a Buddha and teach. And so someone could confuse self-expression, which is what I'm doing, with teaching. I'm not saying that someone can't learn something from me. I'm an intelligent adult who's studied a lot of things, and I brought together a lot of information. And from an awake perspective, which I really have, I can discuss those things in interesting ways. I get all that. I know why people like to read my books. I'd like to read one of my books if I weren't the author. I'd learn something from them. I'd like it. I liked it when I found Alan Watts's books. They were great. I'm kind of like that in my way. But I'm not doing this to be an instructor to anyone because I don't know what you have to do. If all inclusivity works for you and makes you happy, great. I'm all for it. And I have met Bhakti style people who seem to be grooving along really well. And we got along great. We're not the same kind of people in that sense, but that's fine. There's all kinds of people in the world. And I know that this is hard for people to understand about me. That's one reason that I feel a bit misunderstood. But I'm not saying that I've got the keys to the kingdom. I'm saying that I found myself awake, and since then, I've been honest. That's all. And my artistic work became much more honest. My psychotherapy work was very honest. People got a lot out of it. I still have people who were former clients who tell me, gee, Robert, that was one of the best years I ever had, that year I had with you. It's not because I'm so great, it's because I'm honest and awake. But that does not mean that you could come to me and say, I've got this approach, Bhakti, what do you think, Robert? And I say, it's all bullshit, God, bullshit. That's not what I'm saying. No, not at all, not at all. What I'm expressing myself. When I say God is bullshit, I don't mean you're supposed to think God is bullshit just because I said so. That'd be pretty weak on your part. You got to do better than that. You got to take in what other people say and digest it. And then it's like when you eat dinner. The food gets digested and it alchemically changes into flesh and other things that you need. That's alchemical. It takes place in your body, and you don't do it. You're not the doer. See but that's you. But you're not doing it. But without that, there is no you. So the food is taken in and it's made into flesh, and then the parts that don't serve they're evacuated. See how good I am? I'm not going to use the four-letter word for that process, but all right, that's what I mean. It just didn't come up until I titillated myself with the idea. So that's excreted. The parts that were needed are make bones and blood cells and all the rest of it. That's what other people's ideas are good for, not for following like a cookbook recipe. No one's ideas are, there is no path. That's what I'm trying to say. There is no path. There's ideas come into your cognition. You understand what you understand, which is not the original idea. It's what you made of it based on your experiences that started at birth, all the experiences you have had. When you hear me, you don't really see into my mind. You can't. You just see into your own mind what you're making of these words. The stuff that works for you may become bone and blood cells, and if it doesn't, you evacuate it. That's how I understand Nisargadatta or Ramana Maharshi or Gurdjieff or anyone else. I make whatever use I make of it, and the stuff that doesn't work, like Gurdjieff's mysticism, I just throw it out. Can't use that. I don't believe in that. It's so simple. There's nothing to it, really. We're built for this. If only we understand that we're not going to get to the bottom of anything. It's a process. It's not a treasure hunt. And there's no finish line.
Well, it's very beautiful, Robert. What you just said, I mean, it brought a couple of tears to my eyes, to be honest.
I'm having a hard time hearing you. The volume's dropped, or I can turn it up here, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, well, I'll have to double check in post before I upload. But
that's better.
What you said brought a couple of tears to my eyes. I found it very beautiful, very refreshing. I can sense this defensiveness in my body and psychology around talking to people who, you know, I guess do appear to be teachers, whether they call themselves that or not. That seems to go back to, and this is just me, this is just my experience. I can trace all of it, I think, back to just my dad being narcissistic, having had Asperger's, and just never having been interested in my thoughts whatsoever. And I know that's part of an inescapable, depending on who I'm talking to. I know you had this wonderful part of the Don't book, which must have been an exchange you had prior to doing the Zoom meetings, because you were replying to somebody's message or email, and you said, I get asked, you said you get asked all the time if you're going to start a meeting, and you said you've been resisting it because you realize people project family dynamics onto people in a position like that, and you don't want to be the daddy. And and it's interesting because this is a part of modern terminology. My brother pointed out to me that it's a meme on the internet for the past few years where people like Jordan Peterson or whoever will be called daddy, ironically, because that's sort of how their thoughts are treated, as either people are reacting to them very strongly one way or another, in need of a father figure to give answers, to feel safe, or they're perhaps playing out family dynamics of, you know, resistance to a father that was neglectful or abusive. And they're like, fuck you, you know, I don't need your answers, or you're full of shit, or whatever. And it's, either way, it spoils the dialectic as you described it, which is more about getting to the bottom. Well, there is no bottom, but it's trying to take these things out of it. So I guess so I'm going to tie in one other thing I just wanted to highlight that you said much earlier. It's actually something you said in The Gathering. At a certain point, you said in the Gathering video, one of them, that you said you would respect a lot of these non-dual teachers' metaphysics more if they kind of showed more skin in the game, if they showed more of their flesh and blood humanness. Because there was this one moment where a woman was sort of not challenging you, but she was admitting to you the insecurity she was feeling by hearing you talk about your own accomplishments. And she was saying she doesn't have and you were saying that to be accomplished in some sense appears to you to be a prerequisite to hearing this message. And I've heard other people say similar things. And she was saying, I haven't been accomplished in anything, or the thing she wanted to be at least. And she was looking to you she was challenging you in that way. She was like, are you sure? And then you became very personal and vulnerable. And it was so beautiful to me. And then you said that you would respect the metaphysics, a lot of these non-dual teachers, more if they showed their own humanness, their own vulnerability, their own flaws. Because, and I agree with that. I resonate with that. So I'm sort of all over the place here with how I'm responding to you, but and I'd love to hear your ideas on the intersection between psychology and seeking or being awakening from your perspective as well.
What a deep question that is. Wow, that just opened up an endless vista. Let me touch on the word dialectic, because you mentioned it earlier and I didn't pick up on it an hour or two ago, but I will now because I think it's a good word for people to know. The difference between a dialectic and a debate is very simple. In a debate, you are trying to win and convince the other person. In a dialectic, you are open to being convinced. You would like it if someone could shake your point of view enough so that it might shift. That would feel good to you. See, that's a dialectic. That's the difference. So this is dialectic. I'm interested in, like I asked you, how do you see this thing about, is this just entertainment? I really wanted to know, because I don't know. I really don't know if all we're doing here is just farting around, or maybe there's some, I don't know what to call it, something else. I don't know that. It's an interesting question. Yeah, well, the psychology and awakening thing, that the gathering just happened. It was a spontaneous thing. I hadn't planned to do anything like that. I've told that story before, how it happened. I won't repeat it. But when it actually did happen, it was quite a challenge to me, because I had to keep deconstructing all of those projections, which was pretty hard work, because there are a lot of people and everyone is the center of his or her own world after all. And we can't help but project, and it's just what happens. And yeah, it was work. And I just agreed to do another one this coming December. The same woman who's rented that house and offered it to me to do the last one rented the same house again. We're going to do another gathering there. And I am aware right now that there'll be this deconstruction thing that will have to happen. And that is similar to what you do in psychotherapy. See, in psychotherapy, what happens typically, I'm just generalizing because every psychotherapist is different. The person comes in with problems. They don't really trust you and they're afraid of you. And they're very vulnerable because they're the one with the problems and you're the guy with the degrees on the wall and you're just sitting there calm and everything, and they may be upset. And there's a struggle at first. But then if the therapy goes well, they begin to trust you, and that's when they really project. And that's when you see their family dynamics. What they're projecting on you is what mom and dad were like. And that's where the therapist, in the way that I work, there's many schools of therapy after all, but in depth psychotherapy, which is my training and interest, depth psychotherapy, we're looking for the unspoken things that we can only sense. So then, if you handle that in a skillful way, they begin to idealize you. It's inevitable because now you're the parent they never really had, that really can hold the projections. So you can hold that for them. They love you and they think you're like Superman in a certain sense. Robert is really cool. Wow, what a guy. Well, but that's not the end of the therapy. See, if the therapist is not a narcissist, which I am not, I've been accused of it, but I am not. I've looked at it. I've been analyzed. I mean, okay, it's not my problem. We all have some narcissism. I don't mean that, but I'm relatively healthy in their axis. If you're not narcissistic, you don't accept the projections as an indication of what you're really like because you know you're not that cool. Then you return the projections. So at the end, the client leaves often a little disappointed in you. At least they know, gee, Robert's just an ordinary guy. He's not Superman. And I don't need to see him anymore. I guess I got what I needed. Guy's really getting boring anyway. And they say, I think the therapy's over. You say, great, mazel tov. Have a nice life. That's a good therapy. See, that's the ending. The ending is the deconstruction or the disenchantment. The disenchantment. See, that's what I'm about. That's my training. So if I do a gathering, my idea is not for you to become enchanted with Robert. My idea is we're going to kick these things around. And when you leave, you'll say, gee, that was kind of worth going there, but Robert's just a guy. That's beautiful. That's the best thing that you can ever do for someone, is to disenchant them. It's beautiful. This is what deconstruction is about, is taking things apart.
Yeah.
So the thing that people see as my critique is a deconstruction of spirituality. That just happened, Art. It wasn't my project. I had no idea that I was going to be doing any of this. It just happened. Again, it's a long story. I won't repeat it. I've talked about it before. But I've just found myself with this this place, this role. And I find myself using it similar to how I did therapy, which is to be honest and deconstruct our situation and say, gee, we don't know as much as we would like to think we do. We're kind of ignorant. We're just animals after all, smart ones, but animals. And I feel like when I do that, which is only honest, a certain kind of person gains perspective from you. And that's it. There's nothing, there's no sleight of hand. I have no secret. None. No secrets. I have no path. There's no path.
Yeah.
There's no secret. There's no come to Robert and I'll tell you what to think next. None of that. None.
Yeah. Well, yeah. When you describe the disenchantment again, just it brought a couple of tears to my eyes again. This is something that resonates for me deeply. I want to summarize my memory because I have the quotes in front of me of the way you defined path and resonate, because I really like both of your definitions of that. One, with resonate, you said this is often said as some sort of mysterious highfalutin term, and to you, resonate just means similar thought processes, I guess, something like that. Which I really like the groundedness of the way you put it. In the context where I read you saying that, we're probably being a little critical of people who were saying, "Oh, I resonate with this and that." But I also see the beauty of that. And the way you defined path as stones, for something to be a path, it's like someone went there before you, and you're just following the breadcrumb trail of someone else. Which Jiddu Krishnamurti saying, "Truth is a pathless land." This speaks to, finding your own so-called path, but it's not a path at all because it's just this moment. And And mm, yeah, no, I love everything you said. The disenchantment, it reminded me of another scene in a movie. I often think about, not often, but I was following one person a lot for like a year, for semi-arbitrary reasons. And I won't get into who or what the reasons were, but it was someone who people presume to be awakened and enlightened, and I wouldn't doubt that. But they were very big on words and language being all that there is, and words being all that there is. And then it occurred to me one day, well, what about music and photography and film? You know, there's emotions I've experienced that there's no words for, you know, and that's why these memories, these pictures come to my mind when you're saying the end of one of the recent Batman movies, with Christian Bale, the last one. It's a bit of a spoiler, but so feel free to skip ahead if you haven't seen The Dark Knight Rises and want to. But there's this scene that made me cry, and I didn't even like the movie. I was really bored by the whole movie. To me, it was just a bunch of dumb action stuff. I didn't like it as much as the one that came before. But there was a scene at the very end where Alfred, the guy that watched over Bruce Wayne growing up, where basically Bruce Wayne or Batman fakes his death, and only Alfred knows that he's not really dead, but he knows he can't show his face again, or else trouble might arise for some reason. And he says to him, "Well, maybe I'll see you one day just at a cafe, and we'll like see each other and not even say hi, because we're not going to risk anything." And something like that. It's something like that. It's not exactly what happened in the movie, but because it wasn't a thing. It was like the movie was the thing. You know, some of my favorite director is David Lynch, and he says this. People ask him to analyze his movies or what's his interpretation of them, and he'll say the movie is the thing. How could I talk about it? That is the thing. And life is. I'm not going to start talking about life.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. The movie is the thing, not the criticism of the movie, not the review. The review is not the movie.
Yeah, and the review and the interpretation, the exegesis or whatever, that these things are their own thing that are fun or valid or whatever, but they're not the thing. Yeah. And gosh, I mean, one final topic I'd like to get to before we end, if you're up for it, is I'd like to talk about psychedelics for a bit. And
let's stay with the previous matter for a moment.
Sure.
On resonance, you started with
Okay.
that. Someone says this resonates with me. What does that mean? Is that a test of truth at all? Or does it just mean there's part of my brain that gets excited when I hear that you feel that way about such and such? You see, I think people, when you say it resonates, that was clear, and I think that's a good way to use that word. It means it rings a bell. But other people use that as a test of facticity. If something resonates with me, that means it must be true. A lot of people use the idea of resonance that way. A lot of people do. And that's one of the things I critique. I think that's a very foolish test of facticity. If it resonates, what does that really mean? Now, I understand people would like to think that there's a level of intuition and we can't access it directly, but when something resonates, it means that intuitively it makes sense. I get all that. But then I just extend the critique to your intuition. That's not a test of anything. Your intuition arises due to your programming, clearly. It doesn't come from elsewhere. It's your whole life is your intuition. So yes, you may have a very strong feeling about something. I'm not saying discard the feeling. What I'm saying is just notice that the feeling, that the review is not the movie. Let's put it that way. See, if you're always reviewing everything and saying this resonates, this part resonates with me, but this part doesn't, that's not the movie, that's the review. Yes?
Mhm.
Okay, let's,
Yeah.
all right. You want to talk about drugs and psychedelics and all that?
Well, yeah, but goodness, no, yeah, there's something else. I lost it. That's fine. Yeah, no, we can tie this into psychedelics, everything we're talking about already. So there was, and I want to lead into it with this recent description that I encountered on YouTube. There was this Harvard psychedelic group, that like a student group of at Harvard of psychedelic enthusiasts, and there's this lecture on YouTube by them. I forget the name of the guy who runs it, but he has some interesting ideas, and he was doing this kind of interesting to look at PowerPoint presentation with lots of beautiful, trippy images. But he had this point that I found very interesting. He was talking about DMT in particular, but I think this idea, because I watched some more of his videos on psychology, he's basically coming up with his own psychological model based on what he's saying. And that goes beyond psychedelics, that would also include mental illness and all sorts of things. But basically, the idea applied to DMT is that DMT is a 5-minute experience, like salvia, which I've heard you talk about in the gathering videos. And so at the very peak of it, he says, there's this maximum chaos effect. And I was just listening to a Terence McKenna lecture last night, kind of randomly, that came up on YouTube, where he was talking about what DMT does is it doesn't just give you something unfathomable or astonishing to try to analyze. It does this I forget how he put it, because he has such a poetic, beautiful way of talking, but he was talking about like the language analyzing mechanism of the brain or mind itself sort of changed so much that like what it's astonishment looking at astonishment or something like this. And so the way this Harvard guy was talking, he was saying at the very peak, which he claims only lasts like 20 seconds or less or something of a DMT trip, it's a maximum chaos, maximum information overload, basically. And he said, anyone who tells you they take something away from that in terms of meaning or memory, he believes they're lying, or they fooled themselves, basically. Because what happens, according to him, is then you come down to these other layers where there's more and more order comes back in, and sense making, and then perhaps entities appear or stories appear, things that are more familiar to how our language and models of reality work. So it goes from maximum chaos to basically what he would call an optimal point of pleasure, which would be 50% chaos, 50% order. And then you come back to your mundane order state and you try to make sense of all of it, or your mind just does on its own. So, like whatever that the story is, which are very entertaining to hear people's stories about psychedelics. I have no interest in doing them anymore, but I used to a few times, not like a bunch, but I got a lot out of it. And it served a great purpose for me, where it took me out of the reality that I was trapped by. It gave me this depending on no thing kind of experience where it's pure chaos, and then the brain has to rewire and make sense of things in this new context, so to speak. So I'm just throwing a lot of ideas out there again, but the main idea, what are your thoughts on this model of psychedelics? Oh, by the way, he also said that traumatic experiences can do this, and spiritual or meditation experiences can do this. And also, full disclosure, I've had what at the time I considered a samadhi experience about a little over 2 years ago, which was very beautiful, lasted, quite a few hours and then kind of went away. But it included all of the beauty of psychedelics in it without side effects, so to speak. But it came and went, just like a drug. And but I guess all of those experiences take you to a place of pure chaos, or as Terence calls it, pure astonishment, and then you come back down, your mind rewires around that, so to speak. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, everything comes and goes, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So it's important to have experiences and then not cling to them. Very important. If we can do that, we can go on living, which is beautiful. It's beautiful to actually be here, to live. And so I like that view of DMT trip. That's kind of my experience with that stuff. It's really high octane stuff and blows your mind right off its center entirely. And then probably the pleasure part, as you would say, is after the peak. I did have this experience. I have these series of experiences with Salvia divinorum, which I talked about at the gathering. That is even more high octane stuff than DMT, a lot more. That's a different octave entirely. So it's hard to get enough of it. You have to be real quick because someone will have to take the pipe out of your mouth. I mean, you're gone as soon as you get any of it. So I worked my way up to it because I was really afraid of it in a lot of ways. And my wife was tending me because you need someone there to tend you. There's a lot of things that can happen. You can get up and start destroying a room. This happened to a lot of people. Well, so anyway, she had me surrounded by pillows, and I'd lie back and prepare the pipe and all this. The first few times I got stoned and it was interesting, but I did not really get enough. But like the fifth or sixth try, I got enough. Now, that was my last Salvia divinorum trip. That was years ago. It was not like any other experience because for months afterwards, I kept asking myself, is that other place real where I was? Or this is real? And I could not bridge the gap. I just couldn't decide. It was really hard. I mean, because this other place that I went to, which had other characters in it, and I was there, except I wasn't who I am here. I was something else. It was really bizarre. And I'd had I experimented with psychedelics many years ago. Ketamine, I had a doctor friend who injected me and my wife with ketamine a few times. That was amazing dissociation experience. DMT, I used to smoke that in my 20s sometimes. But this was something else entirely. And my friend Robert Hall, a Buddhist figure, was still alive in those days. And in fact, I turned him on to a Salvia trip, which I talked about at the gathering. It shook him profoundly also. But before he tried it, I described this to him. And I said, was that other world real? And he said, come on, you know better than that. But the thing is, I know now that he was right. At least I hope he was. I think he was. But I did not know that at the time. I went through this period of actually several months where I started to feel that I had a glimpse into reality, and that this other thing that I was living here was not. I have no words for it. I couldn't bridge the gap. It was like they were too far apart. Neither world belonged within the other world, not at all. It's two different universes. Well, that's all just taking place in a brain. This is what happens when a certain amount of some certain chemical alters the ordinary physics of the brain. That's clear. It's not that these substances have magical powers, which Terence sometimes used to say they did. He thought, you know, he was a wild man. But I guess I'm a bit of one myself in that sense. But it's not that these substances, I believe, have magical powers or genies built into them or something. It's not really like that. What it really is the sense of self, as I see it, is dependent upon a very fine adjustment of neurochemical reactions that are taking place constantly, countless ones. And you get some substance in there that alters those. And it's different. It's just like some of my psychotherapy patients used to take medication that altered their brain chemistry. And it altered it. I mean, the stuff really works. You take the pill, and after a few weeks, you come in and you say, "Hey, man, I'm not really depressed anymore." And actually, stuff works. It's predictable. It doesn't work for everybody, but if it works, it really works. That's what's good about, let's say, a hit of pot. You don't have to believe that it will work. You just smoke it, and you'll find out. Well, a hit of DMT is a lot more persuasive than a hit of marijuana. A hit of DMT, one good hit of DMT, you won't ask yourself if it worked. See, it's not like meditation. Meditation, maybe you would try it, and yes, if you have one of these openings, then you'll understand that there's something to all this talk. But with a DMT, there isn't any of that. There's no denying it, and whether you believe in it or not, whether you practice DMT or you just did it once, it's all the same. Your brain chemistry will be blown out. So that's how I see that. I got to tell you, I guess we're closing now. I see this all naturalistically. In other words, I believe that what we are is a brain and a body. There are other explanations, all these spiritual explanations. I get that, but I don't have much interest in that. I believe that we're animals and that it's inexplicable how all this stuff is happening. There's no explanation that we have access to, but the brain can be modified in many ways, and when it is, our experience is modified. And that's pretty much how I see it. It's just naturalistically. Not that there's some outside consciousness and all this is arising and these objects look unconscious. I don't know. That seems a bit complex. This is what Ramana Maharshi said. He said, "I'm so glad I never got involved in all that complexity." He meant of Vedanta. He said, "I didn't take to it." That's those words I couldn't remember. He said, I didn't take to it. That's me. I didn't take to it. So I had the awakening art, but I tried to make sense of it afterwards. I read the books and everything and other people's experience. I tried to fit it into a box and I really couldn't. And I'm so glad I didn't take to it. Because then you're in a religion. And see, I'm not an atheist. You mentioned that before, atheist. I'm not an atheist. I just have no interest. I don't take to it. That's not the same thing. My mind doesn't work that way. It's really simple. But I had the awakening. So the terms that I have to discuss that are psychology and art, basically. But I'm not saying there's something wrong when Nisargadatta talks about it philosophically. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I got something out of reading some of his darshans. They're interesting. They stimulated my imagination in various ways. This is what I'm saying. Take it in, you make use of it, and the rest you just evacuate. And that's what I hope that people will do with what I have to say. Not make a big deal out of it. You heard it. Great. You don't have to follow Robert. You got what you got. Move on, go to the next flower, like a busy bee, and get some nectar out of that one. Okay, I guess I've spoken a lot. Do you have anything left?
Oh, well, no, I feel so much sense of beauty in what you were just saying. I want to say that. I want to maybe just mention my own perspective on the brain. That I agree with you. This is a more compelling, grounded way to look at things for myself. Apparently, I don't. I just feel like I don't know. And I think you might agree with me there. But I just want to say that out loud, because there are certain teachers, or not people who say they're not teachers, but a lot of people copy what they say, who talk about the brain a lot. And it almost starts to sound like a comfort blanket to me, like its own handhold. And for me, I don't really know what anything is. And even with regard to a psychedelic experience, like you were saying, quantum physics alone, just and particle physics, these things show us that we know so little about what reality really is, from our perspective, which is itself limited. So I don't know, maybe I was just listening to the physicist you mentioned. I forget his name now, but you mentioned him to Rick Archer. So I was looking him up a little bit, and very interesting theories. But on quantum gravity and all sorts of things. Maybe you know who I'm talking about. It was 2 or 3 years ago, so maybe you forgot. But when you did that interview with Rick, but he was talking about that one of the very grounded theories for quantum physics currently is the whole pretty much infinite multiverse theory, or the infinite parallel universe theory, because the idea that Art Pinsoff saying these words right now is one of a cajillion different simultaneous realities that are all happening. Like very grounded scientists and physicists take that to be one of the less radical interpretations of quantum physics currently. So I don't know what the hell is going on, but back to the Terence quote I said earlier, my own felt experience, I can communicate from that with these monkey noises, that we call English, these mouth noises.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's another vast field that you just opened up. How the subatomic world relates to the world of human experience. It's tremendously complex undertaking to even discuss it at all. The thing that I like about the scientific view of that is these people understand that many worlds, for example, is a theory, not a fact. No one claims that it's a fact. No one, no scientist. And that's an important distinction, because they're not talking about truth. They're saying the mathematics suggest this. But the mathematics, as I was saying earlier in our interview, is based on an axiom. There is no mathematics with at least one axiom. 1 is not equal to 0, or something like that. There must be that, otherwise they can't do the mathematics. Mm-hmm. So in other words, there's an assumption behind everything. That's why we can't arrive at truth. We can only arrive at where these assumptions lead if we follow them carefully and we add evidence. We may arrive at something reasonable, but we won't know if it's true or not. We have no way of ever knowing what's true. I say, no way. Depending on no thing, chapter 10 is an important chapter. It's called What is Truth? And I was asked this question. And I think if someone wants to read that chapter, please do, because I think it cuts to the heart of everything we've discussed here. It's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. And it's the chapter that has that, the mirage discussion in it about mirages and the refraction of light, and how we're just not equipped to know what's true. We never will. See, and to me, a life is creative. As you said, we're all imitating. Nobody can be original in that sense. We have everything we've learned from it's all bubbling up. Yes, but you can still, even though you can't be original, you can still be creative. By which I mean that you remain open-ended, and you never arrive. Creativity is when you don't arrive, you keep on making, like a Picasso, you keep painting. You don't say, well, now I painted this and that's it, it's over now. Tomorrow you start a new painting. And you do that while you can still hold the brush. Matisse used to have the brushes tied to his hands because he was so feeble, and I think he did it with his mouth or his feet. I don't remember. And oh no, it was after he couldn't hold the brush anymore, he could still use scissors, and he cut out paper and stuck that on the canvas, and that was his new art form. See, that's good. That's good. I hope that if I'm old and sick like that, I will still care.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, just on the math topic and the axiom, there's this thing called Gödel's incompleteness theorem.
Good old Gödel. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
We won't discuss that now because that's another huge topic. But yes,
sure.
That's the idea. You can know some things, but you can't know everything. And that's what the physicists also say. They have been saying this now for, I think, about 70, at least 50 years, maybe more. You can know the position of a particle, but if you do, you can't know its velocity. Or you can know the velocity, but you can't know its position. They call it superposition, which it's another world where it could be in two places at the same time, maybe at opposite ends of the universe, and who knows? And many worlds is just the next iteration of that uncertainty. Now we're saying everything that I didn't say in this interview I did say, but in another universe. That's great. That way, it really doesn't matter what you say, because if I didn't cover it here, the Robert in the other universe covered it. It's kind of a comforting idea.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. Yeah, I know. More and more tangents. I do have a final question I want to say to wrap it all up, but this brings to mind in another interview I was listening to recently with the creator of Ethereum, the cryptocurrency, and he recently sold a bunch, like billions of dollars he deleted of some currency that was gifted to him, which people could look up. That guy, Vitalik, forget his name, a recent interview with Lex Friedman.
He bailed at the right time, didn't he? That shit's going down.
Yeah, the altcoin, aka shitcoin market probably is, for sure. But basically, he was asked if he handled it well. How did he feel in retrospect? Because it was kind of a publicity stunt that some altcoin, just nonsense coin that had no real value, someone gifted billions of dollars of it to him just for promotional purposes. And he said, hey, I don't want this power. I'm just going to delete most of it. I'll donate 10% of it to a good cause. And he did. And so he was asked if he handled it, how did he think a week later about handling this crazy position he found himself in? And he said, well, he's very scientific thinker. He just said, well, in the whole many worlds, model, there's some version of me that handled it better, some version of me that handled it worse, but I guess this feels all right. And
Well, I guess in this universe, he's got his yacht moored in a beautiful spot.
his yacht.
He has his yacht moored in a beautiful spot in this universe. The way he handled it here, he ended up with a bunch of money.
He ended up with a, well, he just, yeah. He's a very interesting character, this Vitalik who created Ethereum. I mean, very interesting character. He's very motivated by non-monetary things, I think, because
I'm just pulling his leg, you know.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, no.
But Ethereum is a funny name. The stuff is just like ether. It's nothing.
Right. Yeah, no, it's you're absolutely right. So, well, okay, to wrap things up here, I actually want to end with the final word of your book and book title, because I personally find this an intriguing and somewhat, I don't know exactly what you mean by it. So that's why I want to ask. You know, the final sentence in your book, you know, depending on no thing, find your own mind. Yeah. So what exactly do you mean by mind? And how could you find your own mind? What does that mean, mind, to you?
Oh, what an interesting question. Well, see, the book is like 630 pages. That's what it's about.
But how do you define mind in that context?
I kind of flub that. That's a comedian's line. What is your book about, Robert? It's about 630 pages. Mm-hmm. See what I did?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
I can't really explain what that means, but I think if someone reads the book, by the time they're halfway through, they'll start to get the idea. And if they go through to the end, a number of people have written to me, a big number have written to me saying, this is the best thing I ever read. This is the most wonderful book. Now, I think that's excessive praise, I must say. But what they were saying is there's something nutritious in this meal. And so instead of, you know, writing the précis right now, I'd really encourage people to read the book. I'm not trying to sell anything. It's not my intention, but it costs less than a glass of wine at the bar. I think it sells for like $5. I don't know. It sells for some rather inexpensive price in the Kindle version, which is actually better than the printed version is large. Here it is. It's a big, thick, heavy book. You can read it, but you'd be holding it up, you know. We'll do some marketing here. This is the book. I suggest going to Amazon and getting the Kindle version of it and giving it a glance. Read chapter 10, What is Truth? I think it costs $6 or $8. I can't remember, but it will be worth it. And I know that sounds commercial, but that's not my idea. I get like $1 when one of these books sells, so I'm not going to retire on that. So the point is to read the book. I tried to make it available, and I think that without my having to explain here what depending on no thing means, I do believe that the ideas of what that might mean are scattered throughout the book and well presented in ways that, well, you mentioned this earlier. The way that I work is what you call circumambulation. It means to walk all the way around, see it from as many different points of view as you can. And if you do, something may emerge, you know, some image may emerge, and that image will be useful. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just purely entertainment. We never got to the bottom of that one, and I don't think we will.
I found the book very entertaining, and especially certain parts. Yeah, which I don't want to bring up at this point in the interview. But yeah, it's like I said, 2/3 of the way through when you talk about the art and the artist, and you have some really great correspondence with some people with inside perspectives on different famous spiritual teachers, and that was very entertaining and also humanizing. Like one chapter you had on Eckhart, you know, some information there that some might find critical or unflattering, not even coming from you, but from someone who you published who claims to have known him and been friends with him. But then I think in the very same chapter or the next chapter, you quote Eckhart in this beautiful quote about what now are you waiting on? Why not this now? You know, and you quote him.
Best thing he ever said. He said, when I tell people to be in the now, so many of them say, I don't like this now. I'm going to wait till I'm in one that I like and be in that one. And then he cackled. I read this, so I didn't hear him cackling, but I could hear it in my mind's ear. I mean, that is a complete misunderstanding. And he was like almost appalled by it. He says, be here now. And they say, I don't like this now. I'm going to wait till one I like and be in that one. As if you could.
Yeah. And
So,
yeah. And,
okay. So I could, incidentally, Mike, I do criticize Eckhart Tolle, but yeah. Like this idea about the pain body is just absurd psychologically. But
yeah. I was wondering your thoughts.
But he sold that. But that chapter on Tolle was not my writing. That was a letter I got from an old friend of his, an old girlfriend or an old friend of his.
Right.
She wrote that to me. Eckhart Tolle said some good things that a lot of people found helpful. So I'm not trying to banish the guy or cancel. I'm not trying to cancel Eckhart Tolle. I'm just trying to say he talked a lot of shit. So separate the wheat from the chaff if you're going to. This is what you were talking about earlier about the thorn to take out a thorn.
Yeah.
Great, but know that going in. So if you, in other words, if you pick up an Eckhart Tolle book, understand there might be something helpful in there, but a lot of it's going to be bullshit. It's his bullshit that he believes in, but that doesn't mean that it's true. But there might be something in there, might be a useful tool in there that you can use to get out a thorn you've got. And if there is, great. And the guy helped you and you can feel grateful to him. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not against that. But don't, the guy comes in the room and everybody goes, Eckhart is here now. We can start the party. Come on. That's what I'm telling people. Nobody's that important. No one is. Self-importance that's the death of these cats. They start to strut around. You can see them. You can watch them. They have this air of, now I'm here, so you can all, get back in your chairs and listen. It's kind of weird if you really think about it. We mentioned narcissism before. A lot of spiritual teachers have narcissistic personality disorder. It's pretty obvious. If they don't get the constant feedback from the crowd, they're like a Donald Trump. They get angry or something. Sad. Oh, it's time. Okay. I know we're going on and on, but it's fun speaking with you.
It's okay. Yeah.
You mentioned when people had said, Robert, why don't you have a weekly meeting or something? And I resisted that idea. Yeah, because what if I started to need the weekly meeting to feel okay? I'd be in serious trouble. Then I would be pandering. I'd be talking that way so that I could get off, and then it won't be so truthy anymore, because then I'll be afraid to offend. I have to keep my followers coming. I have to throw them some fresh meat all the time. It's like a YouTube influencer or something. They just have to keep getting more likes and more subscriptions and everything. And look, I have a YouTube channel. I'm glad that people view the videos. I'm not speaking against that. What I'm talking about is being addicted to it, so that's the only way you can be happy. That's what happens to a lot of these teachers, and then they're not speaking honestly anymore, if they ever did. Now if they say the wrong thing, they may lose followers.
Right.
What if they say pussy, like I did earlier? Then a lot of people say, oh, I can't listen to somebody who uses those words. And then they look at the YouTube channel, and suddenly the followers have gone down. They've gone down 10 followers. And you see, that's the one that I guess I'm speaking to you too, and myself. That's the one to avoid, and just do it for the doing, for the beauty of self-expression. Like you're a musician, now you're also an interviewer, and it's beautiful. It's fun, and people may get something out of it. They really might, and all that would be beautiful. As long as it's not an addiction, it'll be beautiful.
Yeah, I also host my own private non-duality discussion group where I just act as the host and facilitator, and not as an authority, and there's no authority allowed in it really, even though we have some published authors like your friend Chuck Hillig and some other people who joined recently like Benjamin Smythe, who a lot of people like, but really it's just shooting the shit, talking about this stuff, and I've had a couple people join it because they loved it and found it so refreshing. And then after a few meetings, they just say, "Oh, well, I don't need to be here anymore." It's like, "Oh, cool." Like I'm not trying to create an addiction for anyone. And yeah, if somebody watches this video and it removes their desire to ever watch my future or previous videos or anything in this realm, great. It's like you said, like get rid of the spiritual search so you can get on to what matters to you in life, if it's so to speak.
Yeah. Chuck Hillig is a funny guy. He's got a great sense of humor. I enjoy him. And he's an old shrink like me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I love him. Yeah. He's a good friend. And yeah, but I just I concur with everything you're saying. I resonate with it. And yet, I know I get, you didn't define what you meant by minds, but I don't actually mind that, because you did. I mean, it's clear to me what you mean by it, and it's beautiful, this depending on no thing.
So that's like this story that I told, that a lot of people picked up on this one. This sculptor made this amazing stone sculpture of an elephant, and it was just perfect in every detail. When people saw it, it was almost like there was a real elephant in the room. So this one guy comes to him and he says, "What a great artist you are. How do you ever arrive at doing something like this?" And the sculptor says, "It's really easy." He says, "I get a big block of stone, and anything that doesn't look like an elephant, I just chip it away."
Yep.
That's how you find your own mind. You just have to keep chiseling away the stuff that's irrelevant.
And does that ever end?
Awakening only ends at the grave. That's what I was saying. I'm pretty old now, but if I live another 10 years and I'm really old, I hope I'm still interested. There's no reason to be depressed while you're alive if you can keep on growing. Don't arrive. Walk on. This old cat, Christmas Humphreys. I love that name, Christmas Humphreys, a British Zen guy from the early 20th century. He wrote a whole book, and each passage ended with "walk on." And it had an effect. I read the book. After you read about 30 or 40 pages of this, you started to actually get the idea. There's not going to be an end to this Zen thing. You'll never solve every koan. There'll always be the next And if you solved every one of the written koans, there'd be the koans that arise in your own mind. And there'll be unspoken. You were talking about the unspoken mind before. Yes, a great deal of our mind is not verbal. A great deal of it is pre-verbal and non-verbal, like music, like photographs, like fear, desire. There are no words. I mean, we have the words for them, but the word fear has no fear in it. Real fear has real fear in it. Nobody can doubt that. You feel fear. You're not going to argue with it. You just have the shit scared out of you, man. Yes. Yeah. So that was a great point you made, and that's a gift that musicians have in understanding themselves, to realize how much of what you need to express you can't discuss. You have to play it. It's beautiful. I was a musician for a while. Not a great one. That's why I didn't continue. I was a journeyman bass player who was always like the worst musician in every band I ever played with. But I enjoyed it. It was fun. And, I was good enough. We got by. But I abandoned that just because I didn't have what it takes.
Yeah, but did I hear or read you say that you met your wife playing a gig? Is that right?
Say that again?
That you met your wife, Catania, while playing bass at a gig?
I was playing bass in a bar and she came in to dance. And this great story, that she went up to the owner of the club and said, I'd like to dance here. And I've got my music with me. I've got my cassette. In those days, it was like this cassette recorder from Radio Shack. And she said, could I, on the band's break, could I play this and dance? And I mean, it was the early 70s, and everybody was tripping around. Well, so anyway, he said, you have to ask the bass player. He's the leader of the band. I was, even though I was the worst musician, I was the front man for the band. So, yeah. So I was glib, like the way I am now, kind of, but young and stupid, but so she comes up to me and she was beautiful. I mean, it was like the sun came up. So she said, can I play my music and can I start this tape recorder on your break and dance? And I said, you're beautiful. And she said, but could I do this? And I said, you don't have to play that thing. We'll play for you. And we did. And that was the beginning of a happy friendship. Very romantic story. Yeah, good story. Good story. Lots of ups and downs. And that's how it is. So now here we are. It's like 45 years later. And I hold her in high esteem.
It's beautiful. I think this might be
it's great.
This might be the best note to end on, the story of love.
Yeah, well, that's why I say if anyone can find that, you don't need any more instruction. Life just tells you what you have to do next to keep everything together. See, that's so simple. We don't have to escape from this. We've got to live it. Have a little faith. Just have a little faith, not in myself, but in life itself. These patterns that we're living out here, these are ancient. We're only here for a briefest moment. These have developed over eons, and they're well worn. People have done the same things repeatedly, again and again and again. And that's all we're doing. The same things I'm saying now have been said before countless times, not in other universes. Maybe they also said in other universes, but in this universe that we do know about, there's nothing original in what I'm saying. Nothing. Follow your heart, find your own mind, simple shit. It's not complicated. What it takes that I have, what I bring to this is that it's not esoteric. That's all I'm saying. It's very simple. If instead of quoting on this is your own mind, what instead of closing on what mind is or isn't, which I say just chip away the part that isn't your mind. Not Robert describes what mind is, because I can't. But if I could, I wouldn't. I'd be an entirely different being. But what the answer to the question, what is mind, is I don't know. And that's in depending on another thing, I think, or it's in the 4T, the 10,000 things. The Bodhidharma goes to India, and someone asks him, what is the self? And he says, I don't know. Well, who is asking?
That's what Ramana said.
That's what we all say in our way. That's what I mean by awake. It's very simple. It's very simple. I have all these stories, you know, that have influenced me. They gave me courage. They after another story I really like is layman Pang goes to the great Zen master and asks to be shown his own mind. And the master doesn't say anything, just sits there and just sits there and just sits there. Eventually, Pang gets bored with the whole thing, and he gets up and he's about to walk out, and just as he puts his hand on the doorknob, the master says, "Oh, layman Pang?" And Pang says, "Yes." And the master says, "That's it."
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
I'm not, when I put myself in with these people, bracketed with them, I'm not making a absurd claim or showing off. It could sound that way. I get that, because people were conditioned to believe that just an ordinary guy who's married and has grandchildren and all that, and, you know, plays the bass or whatever, we've been schooled to believe that that's not how awake people behave. But yes, it is. So if we could just get over the stereotype of what it means to be awake, then we can allow ourselves to be awake and not say I'm just this miserable critter and I need to get this from outside somewhere, because I'll never find my own mind. I'll never find that in my own mind. See? But that's what's required. You can take these other people as suggestions. Some of them are really bright, and I'm talking about this, but that I can't define anything. I can't for anybody. That's what I mean by find your own mind. It's good. You hear, Robert, if it puts you on the scent of something like a hound dog, go for it. But I can't spoon feed anybody anything. I don't have it.
Robert, this has been a tremendous pleasure and honor to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, for sure. So we're signing off.
We'll end the recording now and then say goodbye.